Welcome everyone. I'm Geraldine Vorish, your host for today's Memoir Fest. This is our 2026 Memoir Fest, and I can say that I'm honored to have been asked by Ellen to do so. I'm a professor in the Department of Health, Aging, and Society, and my students and I were fortunate to be partnered with the Intergenerational Memoir Project again this year. I am so pleased that we've had the opportunity to hear from all the participants today, or will hear from them, and to share the fruits of their labor. As you listen to the readings, please do not hesitate to put any comments, questions, or observations you might have in the written chat for discussion at the end of the presentations. I'd like to introduce the student volunteers who made the Memoir Fest possible. Maya Shad has prepared the slides that are presented here today. She'll also be taking over from Jess Downer as the student liaison volunteer. Jess has been in that role for 2 years, and we thank her for her due diligence. Maya, we know that you'll do a great job this coming year as you take over. Owen Liu will be recording and uploading today's session on YouTube. Might we also note that in the past, 2 professors from the University of Carolina at Pembroke, a Professor Rooks and a Professor Grimes, viewed our Memoir Fest on YouTube, contacted us to consult on the process, and decided to integrate a memoir element into their curriculum. So Ellen, you've become a new age influencer. In addition, we'd like to give a shout out to Durga and Sonia, who are also student volunteers here today to cheer everyone on. So to begin, we'd like to acknowledge that the lands we live, work, and meet on are the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississauga. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. It's an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. To contextualize all of our efforts here, I'd like to first ask Loretta to speak about Hamilton in aging in the community and its stellar mandate. So Loretta?
Hi, and thanks, Geraldine. Hi, everyone. My name is Loretta John Zarens, and I'm part of the, or co-leader with Ellen Ryan for Hamilton Aging in Community. And Hamilton Aging in Community grew out of Aging Together about 10 years ago, which was initially an initiative of Ellen Ryan. And today, we've evolved to become a registered charity, offering both online and some in-person activities to help seniors age resiliently. And one of our more recent projects is the scholarship that we offer to students at McMaster who are studying in areas of resilient aging. And you'll probably get information about the fundraiser that we have coming up in May in order to offer these scholarships. We also host discussion groups and things like nature walks. But we are here today for Memoir Fest, a long-standing project of Hamilton Aging in Community. And I will ask Ellen Ryan to introduce our special project today and what you've been participating in, and for those who are joining us as guests.
Thank you, Loretta. Memoir Fest celebrates the Intergenerational Memoir Project. Professor Voros, Loretta, and I started the project in 2021. Over 5 years, we have hosted more than 100 partnerships of senior volunteers with McMaster students in aging and health. The 5th annual Memoir Fest.
I get it all in my face.
We have also published 9 articles in the past year by our memoir writers in the Canadian journal Saging: Creativity and Aging. And perhaps some of our senior writers will be publishing articles and books, or just long letters to their family that can have a great impact. Loretta and I are taking part today reading excerpts from our own memoirs because we joined in the September semester when we had too many students and needed more senior volunteers. So we jumped in because we were already sharing parts of our memoir with each other. We welcome all the other seniors who are reading today, and there are seniors who've participated in the Memoir Project here as part of the audience who are not reading today, and we welcome them and all of our student partners and you, our audience. I hope you'll enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Loretta. So we'll begin with our partners, senior partners, and their students that have helped them write for the 2 terms, the fall term and the winter term, and hopefully help them achieve part of their goal. And we invite the senior partners to consider coming back next year, fall and winter, to continue on with us. So our first reading, we have Ursula, and she had Megan as her senior partner. The title of her entry is A Life Well Lived. So Ursula, if you'd like to read your input. Oh, can you unmute yourself, Ursula?
Ursula, you're on mute. You have to come off mute so we can hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me
There you go.
now?
Yes, we can. Good job.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I just introduced myself as Ursula Hoffman. I came to Canada in 1959 when I turned 21 years old. The minute I turned 21 years old, I went to the Canadian Embassy and applied for an entrance visa. Much to the dismay of my parents, who I didn't inform until I got the visa. When I reflect on my life, the choice to leave one part of it that was familiar, comfortable and safe behind for the unknown in Canada was one of the best decisions I ever made. Here, no one was trying to block me. If I had remained in Germany, my life would have been different. It would have been not been fully my own. I would have remained influenced by the environment around me, one that suggested a rigid way of living: get married young, have kids, work in either domestic or secretarial work. That was a life that was thoroughly lived and enjoyed by many, but that wasn't mine. In moving to Canada, I was able to live my life, the one that I can look back on and say, yes, I lived well. I met my husband on a Saturday, like any other.
Oh, somebody's touched her. I'm not sure, Ursula, if you can hear me, but someone has touched your computer, and I think they might have.
Okay.
Okay.
Hang on.
All right, we're back.
Yes. So the one thing I have learned throughout my life, that you cannot expect it to go a certain way. The only way to live perfectly is to keep imperfection. My life has had as up and down, just as many have. There is value to living strong to both. A life without struggle is not a real life. Learn from life challenges and let them propel you forward with determination. Whatever skills you have, They can be fulfilled. Don't let anyone else tell you and second guess you. You can't do it. Lean on your family and friends. The people around you are there to help you back up whenever you might stumble. Live life just how you want to. Do not let anyone else tell you which path to take. It's your life after all. You are the only one who can know how to make it work and have it good. If you find a barrier has been propped up along your path, do not simply accept it. Either find your way around it, and sometimes you have to smash right through it. Most of all, don't stress about specifics. You know this how to live your life. In many ways, life is like a roller coaster. That's my.
Okay, we lost you again. Hang on.
Okay,
She's back.
yeah.
Start from the start.
My motto is here, in many ways, life is like a roller coaster. Sometimes you might be up, the other times you might be down. But what really, really matters is that you hold on tight and you enjoy the ride. Do you need, and is that sufficient, or you need any more from me?
That was wonderful, Ursula.
It was
That
amazing.
So very true. So
Yeah.
very true. So certainly if you have a comment or an observation, please don't hesitate to post it in the chat and we'll discuss it after everyone has presented.
Okay.
Next we have Jan. And Jan had J.J. O'Neill as his student partner. And his memoir entry is entitled Some Memories from My Dutch Childhood.
Okay. Yeah, so here you can see the final memoir that I wrote, Mijn leven in verhalen, which is Dutch, and it means the story of my life, although my English version is called Stories of My Life. And if I can have the, let me see, oh yeah, so I want to show something, but there's no, I only see a picture. Can I have myself on the screen? Okay. In the meantime, I'll yeah, here, there I am. Yeah. So in the meantime, I say that I was working with J.J. O'Neill, and in the beginning, I was thinking just to write some stories, some little memoirs, some vignettes. But she said, you know what? It's also it's worthwhile to do a chronological memoir. So I did both in the end. So I did the story of my life, and then I did some stories of my life, and the whole thing ended up. And I said, and also JJ helped me enormously. She said, you know, don't stop with writing. Put in photographs or drawings or whatever you have. So and as many specifics as you can. Be as specific as you can. So I put a lot of names in and a lot of geography and all that. But so this is the English version, Stories of My Life. It seems to be backward, doesn't matter. But so it's a tome. It has 200 pages and it is full of photographs and God knows what. It's and then so in the second half of the book there are the stories here. So oh yeah. So these are my stories. This is the second half of the book, and the whole book is pretty thick. You see, it's still work in progress. You see, we're working on the editing. Okay, so some memories from my Dutch childhood. Close to I'm from Holland, as from the Netherlands. You see this old armoire behind me is my grandmother's armoire. I brought it with me in 2008. When I came to Canada. So, some memories from my Dutch childhood. Close to our hometown of Hellendoorn was a low wooded hill called the Berg, which means in English mountain. And the relative flatness of the surrounding land must have been the cause for this exaggeration. By the way, the same goes for Hamiltonians, because they call this thing here a mountain, right? At the end of the 19th century, a cut had been dug through this diluvial hill to allow for the new railroad. And at the end of this cut, a new open-air swimming pool has been built in the 50s of the last century. Hence, again with the typical lowlanders exaggeration, this pool had been baptized the Ravine. It was a beautiful facility with 3 open-air pools and a huge lawn, from which on one side the sandy cliff rose. The pool was unheated, and in the moderate Dutch climate, the water temperature was often far below 20 degrees Celsius, which is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Cycling towards the pool, we would encounter the boys who were cycling home after their swim, and we would call out to them, "How is the water?" And the answer was often 15, which is 60 degrees Fahrenheit, or a similar low number. That did not prevent us from going into the icy water or standing by the side with our shivering, skinny frames and blue lips, only catching the few moments of sunshine on the lawn afterwards to dry and warm up. For swimming lessons, we started practicing dry swimming at home, in a prone position with our belly on a stool or suspended from a sturdy length of wood, practicing the necessary movements before we were allowed to move on to the real thing. Again, suspended, but this time over a large hook on a long pole that was extended in the water by the meticulously dressed lifeguard. Once proficient, we had to learn underwater and rescue swimming, diving down to pick up a heavy puppet which had to be brought up to the side of the pool. There's a photograph of that actually. So there you see, I'm standing on the side, and there's not my father but an uncle, and my brother is holding the boom, and my sister is practicing swimming there, dry swimming. Okay, so that's that. So another story, sometimes when I went with my father, who was a vet, my father was a veterinary surgeon, we went to the farms, and our fox terrier Topsy came along too. And on the dirt roads of the countryside, my dad would let her out to test her running speed. She loved to race behind the car, impersonating a greyhound. And here's our dear Topsy. We had him for 16 years, I think. Very nice little dog. Okay, thank you for showing that. I was still rather small, maybe 4 years old, and sitting next to my father, I would admire him manipulating the steering wheel, and I was convinced that it were those movements that propelled the car. On one of those days, we arrived at a farm, and after my father had parked in front of the huge barn doors, he went inside with the farmer to look at the cow. This time I stayed in the car, because I wanted to try out this magnificent drive trick myself, and turned, like I'd seen my father doing, the key that was still in the ignition. Unfortunately, the car was still parked in first gear and apparently not on the handbrake, so on the power of the starter motor it advanced and crashed into the barn door. My father, who was still inside with the farmer, emerged through the wreckage with a shocked face. He would have to have paid for the damage, but he wasn't angry. I felt very guilty. But maybe he felt that as well, for having left me in the car with the key in the ignition and everything. And here I am, I think, coming up, sitting in my father's car. Yeah, I was a little smaller here than 4 years, I think. But anyway. So those are my little stories. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you for showing us your manuscript, so we can encourage the seniors here to come back next year, fall and winter.
Yeah, thank you.
Laura is next with her and her student partners were Michaela, and she's here, and Jasleen, she's here. And her entry is entitled Sexy Grandma. I'm not sure my grandchildren think of me that way, so I'll be interested in hearing how I'm lacking.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be involved with this because I told Ellen and perhaps you, Geraldine, that there were many things in my childhood which were not necessarily so happy. So I decided I was going to write some happy stories. And so this is one of those happy stories. So I will read to you. When I was 25, hubby, toddler son, and I twice drove to Washington, D.C. to support my father. The first trip was in May when Dad was about to sell the house that had been our family home during my teens and soon move to an apartment. He needed help making decisions about what to do with all the stuff he would not be taking with him. My brother would take some things and we would return home to Canada with a range of useful items. Residual stuff was to be disposed of by the sale or donation. So decisions had to be made and items clearly designated. It quickly became clear that this decluttering effort was being left to us, the young family adults, hubby, sister-in-law, and I over a number of days, and brother joining us after his work. My father? No, his long-standing habit was to avoid as much family decision-making and physical labor as he could. He continued to leave for work at his usual 7:30 a.m. and didn't return until 5:30 p.m. Then, once home and after dinner, many of his evenings were preempted by lengthy, long-distance phone calls from his new fiancée, whom no one else in the family had yet heard anything about. Surprise! Before and following these calls, he was like a starry-eyed teenager swooning about her beauty, charm, and indeed sexual receptivity, as if we really needed to know this. Questions we dared ask were pretty much left unanswered. It had been less than a year since my mother had died at age 50 following 29 years of marriage. What we learned was that our grandfather had, maybe 6 months after Mom's passing, encouraged Dad to take a break from work, and that Father had signed on to a 2-week cruise. It was on his leisure trip that he had met and apparently fell hard for a woman from New York who, at that very time of our decluttering, had moved to Idaho in order to get a quickie, uncomplicated divorce from her husband of 25 years so that she would be free to marry our recently met father. Needless to say, we had a torrent of questions. Few were being well answered, but what could we do? In under a week, the house was fully reviewed, items considered and assigned. I can't recall what was given to my brother, nor what was left to be sold and donated, but the U-Haul trailer hitched to our car, headed back home, was full packed with useful items, furnishings for our young son's bedroom, 2 heavy bamboo chairs for our empty basement, lamps, mirrors, linens, kitchen and craft items, and most cherished, my childhood piano. Our second drive to D.C. that summer in mid-July was to attend Dad's wedding with this totally unknown to us bride-to-be. We soon learned that she also had 2 adult children close to our age and that they were equally stunned by the sudden life redirection. At this point of my story, I should share that my relationship with my mother had never been wonderful. So in preparation for these nuptials, I decided to at least keep an open mind about welcoming magnificent Marjorie. Our family arrived in D.C. the afternoon prior to the planned ceremony. Dad had arranged a hotel room for our stay, and that evening he was taking us all to a fine restaurant where the 2 families could comfortably meet. While Dad While waiting for Dad's arrival, we freshened up, and Son, a happy, active 21-month-old, enjoyed our huge bed where he jumped around, falling repeatedly into the lush pillows and fresh linens. Hubby and I delighted in this bouncy exploration, and then I sparked an idea for our first meeting. By the time they knocked at our hotel door, we were ready to begin our introductions. Hubby and I planned to step forward, shake hands, and ask some initial questions, easy initial questions. Our son, however, stole the show by continuing to jump on the huge bed while chanting again and again my father's own words, which I had just that evening taught him. Sexy grandma, sexy grandma, sexy grandma, he gleefully repeated while bed bouncing. Well, that certainly broke the ice, and soon all the adults were heartily laughing. We took pride in our son's performance. Dad took this mockery in good stead, and Marjorie instantly fell in love with this babe who was to become her first, best, and for many years only grandson. She was gorgeous, warm, kind, welcoming, and even early on much supportive of me in ways that my mother had never been. While starting out with many uncertainties, this proved to be a wonderful marriage full of unique travel, cultural experiences, new friendships, great culinary opportunities, and in the end, a longer, warmer coupling than Dad had had with my mother. As well, for almost 5 decades, I was blessed with a dear friend, and my children were blessed with the most wonderful grandma one could want. We were also lucky to have had this, indeed, sexy grandma in our lives. Now, this picture is of Marjorie when she was 90 plus. So you have to think about what she was like at 50. She was definitely not quite as, not quite the same. But I don't have those pictures anymore because I've given all of my family pictures to my granddaughter. So this is the best I can do in terms of who the sexy grandma is.
Wonderful. Well, I can't compete with Marjorie, that's for sure. So, our next author is Loretta, and Miles Castle was the student partner, and her entry is entitled Where I Came From. Loretta?
Thanks, Geraldine. I'm going to ask Miles to unmute herself and say hello and introduce me and say a bit about our working together.
Hello, I'm Miles. So, our final call ended in deep gratitude and reflection on the journey we've shared together. I thank Loretta for trusting me with the most intimate chapters of her life and for the wisdom she shared about love, parenthood, spirituality, resilience, and the courage that it takes to keep going through life's hardest seasons. We shared many laughs along the way, especially when her stories had me joking about how carefully I'll be choosing the kind of partner I hope to have one day. Our weekly conversations became beautiful and a beautiful example of the power of intergenerational connection, and I will truly miss them. It is now my honor to introduce Loretta to the group, a pastor's wife, mother, caregiver, the woman of quiet strength who lived much of her life guided by strict religious expectations. Through newfounded spirituality, love for gardening, and a passion for learning, through history and research, she has stepped into a season of renewal. Her memoir is a story of endurance, awakening, and the courage to finally speak her truth.
Well, thank you, Miles. If I ever get this published, I'll ask you for that to put on the back cover. But thank you. And Miles stepped into a bit of a challenging situation because I'm now in the third draft of my memoir. Always changes to make, but I appreciated the chapters she read, the many chapters, and your insight and feedback. So today I'm going to read the first chapter of my memoir, which has about maybe 30 some chapters that I'm in the third draft on. And I've entitled this one Where I Came From. And that's based on a quote that begins this chapter: "Never forget where you came from on the way to where you're going." Author unknown. I have one black and white photo from when I was an infant, about 5 months old. It's a warm, late summer day in 1954. My parents had bought their first house in a new subdivision called Rexdale in North Etobicoke. The year before, this area had become a part of Greater Toronto. My father, Arvids, was always looking for opportunities to use his recently purchased Kodak camera. He had seated my mother, Toby, on a blanket in the backyard. I am lying on her lap, asleep. On one hand, this photo shocks me. I look so small and fragile for my age. My mother was a smoker when she was pregnant with me and my brother. I weighed just over 5 pounds at birth, and there had been complications. In spite of my small size and this being a second pregnancy, I was in a breech position, refusing to turn. My mother was gassed. The doctor manually turned me. Then long metal forceps grasped my head to extract me. The umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck. My mother told me on more than one occasion how ugly I was at birth. I was so ugly I couldn't have been her baby, she said. She whispered to my father and her sisters that she was certain the nurses had switched me with another newborn, unaware of the damage done by forceps to a baby's head during delivery. I carried her misbegotten comments all through my childhood, searching photographs for any sign of cuteness or prettiness. I found none, only an awkward, homely child staring back at me. Yet, despite a difficult delivery and my ugliness at birth, my mother cared for me. In this photo, I'm attired in a lace-fringed bonnet and little dress. My mother is smiling, looking adoringly down at me, her light brown hair cascading past her shoulders. Her left hand elevates my sleeping head. She covered the little dress with a handmade knit sweater and booties with ribbon ties, passed down to her by her sister. Always beautiful, my mother is wearing a short-sleeved print blouse and a pair of short shorts, revealing long, tanned legs. In contrast to our serenity, there is Edgar, my 20-month-old brother. He's by my mother's right side, wearing a leather harness over his shorts and top. Her arm holds him tight. No longer the center of my mother's attention, he's ready to pull and dash off as soon as my father presses the shutter button. "Don't move," my father must have shouted. "Ready, steady, snap." With a film camera, you never know how the photograph is going to turn out. Yet my father caught the moment, that brief split second when all was still. The neighborhood is now 70-some years old with mature trees lining its streets. But in this photo, it is a new development on what used to be agricultural land. There is no landscaping around the house or fences between the properties. It's been stripped bare, save for an elm tree, which would meet its end in a few years. In the 1950s, the Toronto area was devastated by the loss of 80% of its elm trees to Dutch elm disease. To my parents, this 3-bedroom bungalow on a barren scape on a street waiting to be paved was a dream come true. Even with the challenges of new life in Canada, they had hope. My parents, especially my father, were driven to succeed, to take advantage of this incredible opportunity of being part of the boom years in Canada following the Second World War. My parents both grew up in Latvia. My mother, Tabita Valda Strasdinch, had spent her formative years in a Baptist orphanage. Her parents, Janis Strasdinch and Anna Latsis, had separated after barely 10 years of a marriage striven with conflict. Her father, Janis, left for Canada in 1928, before she was 2 years old. He had made a risky business decision. It failed, and he declared bankruptcy. He wanted a fresh start in Canada and Canada wanted immigrants to work as farm laborers. In 1929, the year after my grandfather emigrated to Canada, my grandmother Anna left Riga with her 4 children. She traveled 250 kilometers east to the small village of Tilja, close to the Russian border. She had recently been diagnosed with tuberculosis. With limited options, she decided to place the children in care at a new Baptist orphanage. As much as she wanted, she could no longer work with her deteriorating health. She lived with her mother in Riga and traveled as often as she could to see her children. Then, in 1930, Anna moved permanently to Tilja, not just to be with her children, but for another man. Mr. Janssens was one of the school teachers at the orphanage. She lived in his apartment in the village while her 4 children lived at the orphanage. After her divorce was finalized in September 1931, Anna married Mr. Janssens the following May. Perhaps she knew she didn't have long to live, and this was her strategy to keep the children in Latvia. By early December of that year, she was dead. My mother told me she remembered the death of her mother and growing up in a care home for children. I heard stories of the woods and fields, her playground. Always musical, she vividly recalled the happy times singing in harmony with her siblings. Yes, they had lessons to learn and chores to do, but much time was spent roaming, foraging for berries, hazelnuts, and mushrooms. I never asked about my grandmother's funeral, so I can only imagine. I wonder in 1932, would the children have been made to remain behind, as per the custom of the day, an adult-only event? Or did they walk a country road on a cold day in early December to the cemetery outside the town where this grandmother is buried? The ground, not yet a solid mass, would have been hand-dug by men from the village. Maybe my mother was lucky and got to go, riding in the horse-drawn wagon beside the driver. Was she turned in her seat, watching the casket containing her mother's body shivering along the uneven road? Did she ever walk to the cemetery again, or stop there to say goodbye when they left for Canada in 1938? The last time this grandmother's headstone was visited was in 1996 when my father traveled there. It was 3 years after my mother's death and 5 years after Latvian independence from the Soviet Union was restored. Well worn by that time, the words "sweet mummy" in Latvian could still be read. On my trip to Latvia in 2024, the headstone was long gone, along with her living memory. After Anna's death, my grandfather fought his mother-in-law for custody of the children. She couldn't bear the thought of them leaving for Canada. It was a long shot and took several years, but he won the court battle. Quickly, he made arrangements from Canada for them to travel by train to Belgium for passage on a transatlantic ship to Montreal. From there, they boarded a train to Toronto. My mother's older sister, Elvira, age 18 at the time, was responsible for keeping them safe and meeting their needs as they traveled. Perhaps the oldest two could have insisted on staying in Latvia, but they all agreed to join their father. My mother had a rough landing in Toronto, meeting her father for the first time since she was a toddler. Now she was 12, and he had remarried, a necessary action to win the custody battle. Without language helps for immigrant children in the Toronto educational system at the time, my mother was put back several grades to learn English. Playing catch-up to learn and being taught strictly in English, she only got to grade 9. She was a tall girl and felt humiliated. Her stuttering escalated, muting her in stressful situations. As she grew through her teen years and came into some sense of self-awareness, my mother wanted to pursue art. Her first oil painting, a winter scene, hangs above my desk. Yet despite her talent, her father and stepmother would have none of it. She recounted their reply. "What do you mean you want to be a painter? You should become a nurse if you don't want to get married and have children." Her stepmother had been a field nurse in the British Army during the First World War. Confused and angry, my mother dropped out of high school and eventually left home. The last one to leave, she lived with one sister and then the other, working different jobs. Her life changed when she met my father. Always a little orphan and dreaming of what would make her happy, now, finally, she was going to live her dream. In December 1950, when she was 24, my mother was living with her sister Velta in an apartment in the Sunnyside area of Toronto. They remembered the Sunnyside Amusement Park along the lakeshore in the High Park area of West Toronto and the Palais Royal, the local dance hall. By chance, 3 young Latvian men moved in down the hall, one being my father. These fellows had just been released from the displaced persons movement for World War II refugees. They were relocated to Toronto after working on the railway lines in Northern Ontario for a year. Smitten, my mother and her sister Velta concocted a scheme. They would knock over their Christmas tree and ask for help from their new neighbors. That's what they did, and it worked. My parents married on September 22nd, 1951. My grandfather wasn't impressed. In spite of his previous bankruptcy in Latvia, my grandfather was always an enterprising man and a risk taker. He had been in Canada for almost 25 years at this point, and after anglicizing his name to John Standish, he started his own metal spinning business in Toronto. He was established and had little empathy for my father, whom he viewed as the refugee he was, an illiterate with no family, education, assets, or skills. On top of all those strikes against him, my father had recently lost an eye to a piece of metal shrapnel, not in the war, but in a factory in Toronto. As my father told me, Giannis couldn't let his youngest daughter marry a displaced person whose parents were now caught behind the Iron Curtain. Appearances were important to him. He wanted better for my mother and showed his displeasure by not attending the wedding. My parents weren't deterred by my grandfather's disapproval and absence. After a small marriage ceremony by a Latvian pastor and some quick photos at a studio, they went with their Latvian friends on a group honeymoon, a fishing trip to Temagami. When I was growing up, irrationally influenced by post-war modern wedding culture, I thought their witness-only ceremony and honeymoon were just tacky and embarrassing. Now I see it as a creative move, an early 1950s destination wedding with family and friends. Eventually, my grandfather came round and took my father under his wing. He steered him toward finishing high school, becoming a tool and die maker, and getting some technical post-secondary education. He mentored them on how to secure a mortgage and purchase their first house. And weren't my parents flourishing? By the time I went to grade 1, the lot was fenced and being landscaped. The third child, my sister Priscilla, was born in 1956. Soon there would be a car in the driveway. All this with cash, no credit cards or public health care in those days. My father yearned for success, stability, and peace and quiet after being conscripted by Nazi Germany when he was 17 years old. Baptized Lutheran, my father, Arvids Valdemars Jaunzerink, had been a city kid growing up in Riga, Latvia. His mother, Anna Julie Krivinch, owned a fish store in the city. His father, Christianis Jaunzerink, managed the properties they owned. My father spoke fondly of visiting his relatives on their verdant farm outside of the city. Together with his brother, they would spend weeks there each summer. While his parents had an apple tree on their city property, it was at my aunt's farm where my father came to love nature and the quiet of rural life. There were cows to milk by hand and hay to cut and gather into sheaves. Cattle or horses pulled plows and wagons. Some farmers had trucks and tractors for these jobs. A painting by a Latvian artist depicting fields of hay sheaves and woodland hung in my parents' home for decades. It was a beautiful and consistent reminder of Latvia, of what they loved and what they lost. My Aunt Velta, also an artist, gave me her painting of the country roads around the orphanage at Tilja, depicting hazel bushes. So it's no surprise that the barren backyard soon turned into its own Garden of Eden. I don't remember my father planting the peach pit in the center of the garden after he had finished eating it, but I remember being bent over, my face close to the ground as it was growing, and my father saying, "Imagine having a tree that grows tasty peaches." As I grew, the tree grew, and I waited each spring for the blossoms to appear on its small frame. Within a few years, it was producing those very tasty peaches, and a few years later, it was so weighed down, the branches needed to be propped up. The backyard wasn't the acres of forest and field my mother explored when she was my age, nor the farm life my father experienced, yet it was its own paradise. In the summer, my mother sent me out to the garden to pick green beans, a green pepper, and a tomato for supper. In July, we'd eat as many red currants as we picked. The tart ones were quickly turned over to my mother to be made into jelly and jam for a vitamin C dose during cold and flu season. It was a while before I appreciated them straight off the bush. One year, my father told me to get my coat and hat on and come out to the backyard with him. He wanted to show me how to graft an apple tree. It was late winter and I was about 11 or 12. There was no snow on the ground, but we wore boots to keep our feet warm and dry from the soggy grass and soppy garden soil. As we stood by a young tree, my father explained that the sap would soon start to run. The grafting had to be done now, he explicated, if we wanted the graft to be successful. Why are you doing this? I asked as we stood at the tree. To get two different kinds of apples growing on the same tree, he answered with enthusiasm. Wow, I thought to myself, as he gave me the small branch to hold while he got the knife out of his pocket. You need a knife with a very thin, sharp blade, he clarified, as he made a precision cut vertically through the smooth bark of the tree and inserted the little branch I was holding. How does it stick? Won't it blow away? You hold it firmly, and I'll brush it with this paste, and then I'll wrap it tight with this tape. No air will get to it, and it won't blow away. Don't worry. As he talked and showed me the technique, he reminded me that our last name meant little young branch in Latvian. When spring arrived, my father excitedly told me the graft had worked. The little branch was sending out leaf buds. I skipped out to the backyard to marvel at what had happened. I wonder, why did he teach me how to do this? Maybe I was the one who showed interest and aptitude from an early age. Was I the one who stood patiently and watched as he explained? Was I the one wanting to learn and hear the stories? My life started like the second creation story in the book of Genesis. It was idyllic. With each passing year, the garden expanded and my parents transformed it bit by bit from barrenscape to bounty. The peach tree flower beds, magnolia by the front door, the silver maple that shaded me as I built forts made out of blankets, clothespins, and folding lawn chairs. There were grapevines growing along the fence, fruit trees, vegetable garden, berry bushes, lilac, a sprinkler in the summer, and a small skating pad in the winter. But just like Adam and Eve were going to have to suffer to feed themselves and birth children, my parents, now in their 30s, soon realized that life as a new family was not going to be as calm and reposeful as they hoped for. The new house and the back garden were not always going to save them. Thank you.
Thank you, Loretta. You brought back memories for me because I used to graft roses with my mother. So thank you for them reminding me. Our next senior author is Irene, and Siona was her student partner, and her entry is entitled A New Country.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Irene is on the call, but I think we're having trouble with her mic. Could someone with a host ask her to unmute if you go to the top right corner and click the 3?
All
Oh, there
right.
we go.
I've unmuted.
I
Correct?
think we can hear you.
We can hear?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. New country. We escaped from Latvia to Germany because the Soviets were taking over. Post-war Germany was dismal and a defeated country with the cities in ruins. Along came the opportunity for new dreams and hopes, to immigrate to Canada, Australia, or the US. To be able to start a new life was hard to resist, as it did not seem possible to get back to Latvia. It was occupied by the Soviets for the next 50 years. My parents chose Canada. We left Germany from the port of Hamburg, which was a heap of rubble after the war. We boarded the Samaria, a Cunard liner, to cross the rough, scary January Atlantic Ocean to Canada. We arrived in Halifax and then boarded a train for Petawawa, Ontario. arranged by the Lutheran Church who sponsored us. It was January, and the snow was knee-deep on arrival. A beautiful sight, but we were not wearing the right clothing for this climate. We were able to rent a large old farmhouse with a grand veranda around two sides. The land was rented out to farmers in the area. My father found renters because we did not need all that space. A retired lady living in the living room and dining room. The farm kitchen and two small bedrooms were rented to a retired couple. The rest of the house was occupied by us. 3 bedrooms upstairs and 2 small rooms downstairs. One of the rooms had to be set up as a kitchen with a stove for cooking. There was a well outside for water and an outhouse, which we rarely visited. One of the clothes closets was used for the chamber pots, our toilets. We each had our own to fill and empty. This was Canada? So primitive and yet wonderful. Having a bath in a tin tub after heating the water on the stove was hilarious. This was a farmhouse almost 100 years old with no plumbing. The irony was, people saw us immigrants as backward, while we thought the opposite. Renting to other occupants meant that we lived rent-free. It was an opportunity for a great start in this new country. Petawawa was a village next to the military camp. Soldiers from the military camp would be seen regularly, and the sounds of military exercises could be heard daily. But this was not war. It was training for war. There was no need to be afraid. Life in Canada was a huge adventure. There was no such thing as being taught English by somebody, as we were among the first wave of immigrants to be invited to Canada. You simply had to learn it yourself. I was given a pile of books, starting with the grade 1 reader about Dick and Jane and their dog Spot. See Dick, see Jane, see Spot, see Spot run, see Jane run, see Dick run. But I was supposed to be in grade 8. Day after day, I sat in the back of the class, feeling sad, in isolation, watching my classmates learn. One day, I was sent to the grocery store, and that is where I first saw comic books, something I had never seen before. These books were so colorful and interesting, I simply had to buy one to take home. Reading comic books became my way of learning English, and my sister and brother liked them too. Each comic book cost 10 cents. I found a way of getting that amount of money by turning in empty Coke bottles. Each bottle was 2 cents. 5 bottles bought me a comic book. I would find the bottles along the railway track, discarded by the men who daily maintained the track. The Archie comics were my favorites, with Veronica and Betty and Jughead and all their adventures. Fitting in was my main goal. I had long braids while the other girls had short hair, curled by a Tony, a home perm. I was very self-conscious of the differences. My shoes were lace-up boots, while the girls wore penny loafers. Now, 75 years later, I see braided hair and my boots are on trend. Then it made me feel like an outcast. That first winter in Canada, I learned to skate on an outdoor rink and even played hockey. Not really. It was fun just the same. In the spring and summer, everybody played baseball. And that was also fun. I made new friends as I started to speak the new language in the new country. I was invited to sleepovers and visits and started to feel like I belonged to this new country. I made it to high school that September, speaking English, after 8 months of reading comic books. That's it.
Thank you, Irene. You know, there's an Antiques Roadshow on TV, and somebody found a box of Dick and Jane books under the auditorium stage, and they're worth big money now. Too bad you didn't
Oh,
snag a few, right?
should have grabbed them all.
Yeah, right. And I'm sure some of those comic books, if they're in mint condition, are worth something.
Geraldine,
Yes.
before we go on to our last speaker, I just want to remind everyone if you could put comments or questions for the students or the senior writers in the chat, and we'll have a chance to go over those after our last presenter. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Loretta. So our final reader is Ellen Ryan, and Ethan is going to introduce her. They were with us in the fall term. Ethan?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ethan, and I would like to introduce my partner from last semester, Ellen. She's a devoted mother and grandmother and would often express her greatest achievements to be her family and the hardships she'd overcome. These experiences have helped shape the person Ellen has become, especially through her love for poetry and creative expression. I'll now pass it over to Ellen.
Thank you, Ethan. And thank you for all our conversations over the last year. The title of my talk is My Pilgrim Shadow. It's always about the light. About 20 years ago, a new technology led me into a mindful creative practice. An inexpensive digital camera fit into my pocket for my usual long walks. Walking with the camera close at hand became a practice to focus my attention on nature, repeatedly bringing me back from daydreaming to the present moment. Then my shadow broke into the photos. Soon I fell under the spell of a creative calling, follow the light, to photograph my shadow anywhere. And I'll just make a side comment. Most people participating in the Memoir Project tell stories from their early or midlife. And mine is an example of a memoir related to my later life and the adventures I've been having in following my path to creative aging. Getting back to my text, why do you keep taking photographs of your shadow, my friends ask? Is it about the darkness, the shadow side of life? No, I reply, it's not about darkness. And it took me a while to realize that it's always about the light. On my walks with a camera, I would photograph my husband along the trails and within landscapes, as I know that images with a human figure appeal. But what about those solo walks when I really have time to meander off the path for a good photo? I began to capture my solo walking companion, my shadow. I record my shadow walks in local neighborhoods, across national borders, on city sidewalks, on country lanes, and at the seaside. I photograph both our shadows in many settings as my husband and I travel. Slide, please. I'm going to show photos, just 4 now. The best surprise among my photographs is called Camino Pilgrims. There we are. We climb the steps of the Cathedral de Santiago de Compostela after completing a portion of El Camino, a pilgrimage across northern Spain. There I am with my Tilly hat, holding the camera. Transformed by a trick of the light, Patrick is an ancient Spanish padre with skinny neck, wide-brimmed clerical hat, a clerical cape, and crooked walking sticks. In fact, Pat holds my straight hiking poles while I take the shot. The angle on the stairs gives him a cartoonist's thin neck, while his Tilly hat becomes squat with a rolled rim. The impression of his backpack creates the cape. In that mid-afternoon light, our shadow stamps those venerable steps with mystery. Here are a few other examples of my solo shadow. Next slides. My reckless shadow. Note my head is at the bottom of the steep stairs. Next slide. Tree spirit. I just love the texture of my shadow in this ancient tree. And in this slide, half high fashion, sculpted by stone. This was my second best surprise. As you can see, the cracks in the patio stones create the impression that I'm wearing a jacket, a scarf, and a long skirt. We can go back to stop sharing now. My focus on shadow photos, I realize, my focus on shadow photos sharpens with an invitation from the Hamilton Library for a gallery showing of my pilgrim shadows, plus an invitation for 2 presentations, one in person and one online. The show features images of my own shadow on walks near home and while traveling. This was in 1922 or 3. Due to a slow return to in-person events after the pandemic, only 2 people attend the first talk. One is my friend Teresa, the other a young man who later identifies himself as Cameron, a part-time student of art history and photography. I introduced the slideshow by saying, this talk is practice for the online show. I've really been looking forward to this talk, says Cameron, rubbing his hands together. It took me 2 buses to get here. I begin the photo slides, each with my shadow in a different context. This photo was taken in Sardinia while we toured with grandchildren, I say. This, a sunset photo in Florida, where we often spend 2 winter months. This one along my favorite walking trail at home, and this one among August color in our community garden. Cameron engages frequently, not always letting me finish my sentence. How does photography relate to painting? Shaking my head, I'm thinking, that's too big a question to consider here, especially before I introduce why I take shadow photos. What is your creative goal with respect to the shadows? Now that's a good question, I think, worth pondering in front of the fire on cold winter nights, but I don't know quite what to do with this questioner. Perched on the edge of his chair, he asks, what are you planning to do with your memoir, a book or a website? Putting my hands out in protest, I say, this is not my talk about memoir writing. This is my talk about shadow photography. Cameron is frustrated too. He's tapping his fingers on the arm of his chair as he thinks up his next comment. After further repartee, Cameron says something specific enough to open my eyes. Aren't you telling your life story here? Sardinia with family, Florida in the winter, walking near home, love of garden flowers? I gasp, then pause, catching my breath. Oh, Cameron, the light is finally dawning. I'm beginning to see your point now. Memoirs are supposed to have often a lesson learned. For me, I needed to widen the lens of my mind. My focus was too limited. Now I realize that my shadow photography does illustrate my late life adventures and creativity and travel. As a result of this unexpected conversation with Cameron, I have added a section to my emerging life story. It's entitled Finding My Edges, a memoir of stories, poems, and shadow selfies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Loretta's now going to go through the questions, comments, observations in the chat. And if anyone would want to weigh in with their thoughts and opinions just randomly, please, Loretta, go ahead and organize the group.
Thanks, Geraldine, and thanks to all of our senior readers and all the students who are partnered with them and everybody who was here today. It's been great. Some people have put comments in the chat, but I'll just ask people if they don't mind saying something. So, Michaela, you want to read something about Irene. If you want to go ahead and read that now, unmute yourself and read that now, that'd be great.
Yes, absolutely. My was Laura, is Laura. And there was a moment after one of our discussions that I felt, compelled to write about the meaning of this placement, and it's rather short, but here it goes. I think one of the most meaningful aspects of this placement within the Memoir Project is far more than simply helping our partners tell their stories. It lies in the relationship we build along the way. What emerges as an intergenerational connection that is grounded in mutual curiosity and recognition. And in my case, speaking with somebody nearly 50 years my senior has been both surprising as well as affirming. Despite the span of time between us, we discovered many parallels, shared interests, overlapping values, similar educational pursuits, and resonant life experiences. And this sort of reinforced for me that the heart of this placement is relational. And many of us are drawn to the social sciences by a desire to make the world a better place, which is an aspiration that is both expansive and at times rather daunting in scope. Yet this experience reframed that ambition in a more tangible way, where meaningful change can begin with one relationship, one conversation, and one act of genuine listening. And through my weekly conversations with Laura, we cultivated a connection that felt both grounding and energizing, where our dialogue created a space where each of us could be fully present, and in that space, our individual personalities, memories, and ways of seeing the world surface with greater clarity. It feels rather fair to say that we both came to anticipate these meetings with genuine enthusiasm, looking forward to not only continuing her story, but to continue the relationship itself. So I'm not sure if, other students and other senior partners can relate to this, but as I mentioned, the heart of this memoir project and perhaps the broader organization, it's relational, and building these intergeneral relationships are so meaningful and so important. And so that is my experience of participating within this placement. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Michaela. And I was going to ask other students as well. If you, I know, Miles, you wrote something, and if you'd like to share that, and that might give our other students a couple of moments to think about what they would like to say about their experience with this intergenerational project.
Yes, of course. Yeah, to add on to Michaela's experience, I've had a very similar one as well. Like what I said in the chat is just, it was such a privilege to be a part of this journey. Like I've learned so much about resilience and about, womanhood, the unfortunate sometimes aspects of womanhood. It's just so real, and it shows the power of these intergenerational relationships. It has almost made me view also like my mother and my grandmother very differently too. Like, they're people, right? So it's like they've lived an entire life. And I know it sounds weird saying that, but like I'm really beginning to see that myself, that they've lived an entire life. And I think that is really important, because that's the whole power of it, is to spread the wisdom and to share it along generations.
Thanks, Miles. And I completely loved meeting with you for how many weeks late on Mondays. Thank you very much for journeying with me as well in this. Thank you. So any other students like to share? Don't be shy.
I'll share if there's
Okay,
if you guys can
Megan.
hear me all right. Okay,
Yeah, sure.
I totally agree with the relational aspect. I don't have anything quite as eloquent, but I think the word I would use for my experience was very like invigorating, especially with like I feel so incredibly privileged to have met someone, the word I could have used to describe Ursula really is invigorating. To have met someone like her and be allowed into this really deep and personal part of her life, and to be allowed to know her story so intimately, that sort of connection, I really don't have like a point of reference for that outside of this very specific experience. And I think that alone is why I would recommend it. But I also found the process of like not only noticing the differences, but like the similarities in our lives and our worldviews and all that was so incredibly valuable. And then literally the process of writing, because that was part of what I helped with her. Like I actually wrote chapters for her, was so like, it was, I really don't have words for it. And I think that sort of summarizes it, right? I really had to step outside of myself and come to understand the perspective of a different person. And that was just so valuable that I would recommend it to anyone who's even like a little bit on the fence.
Thanks, Megan. Anyone else? Any other students?
I can go. I can just share a little bit about my experience. Really just
Okay.
echoing what everyone else said. And again, it's not going to be quite so eloquent. But yeah, Irene and I met on Tuesdays. We met every Tuesday. And yeah, same thing. It was so interesting how many similarities we had despite how different our backgrounds are. There was so much that we had to relate to. And there were, again, so many similarities in our own experiences despite huge differences, so many similarities in our worldviews. Um, and then so many like very, very interesting differences as well in terms of the norms and what her childhood looked like versus mine. We didn't really present this part of her story, but a lot of the beginning of her story, or a lot of the beginning of her memoir was what it was like growing up in Germany during that time and finding like solace and in like these little village escapes. And a theme that we really highlighted in the beginning of the beginning few chapters of the book is like her childlike like ignorance and the bliss amidst such a difficult time. And she says some quote about how the only way she really knew anything was going on was when occasionally someone would come home and say like their father wasn't coming back. But all the while she would just be like getting donuts and going to harvest festivals with her friend. And obviously she explains it way better than I just did. But yeah, just I was just shocked by how many similarities there were in her story, how many differences there were in her story, and how I felt like I could relate and understand each one.
There we go. Thanks, Iona. Any other students wish to talk, or even a senior might want to jump in and talk about their experience working with a student? Don't be shy. Okay, I'm just looking at the time and I don't want to go over, so I have a couple of questions. Yes, for Jan, how and where did you get your memoir printed? Now, you put an answer in the chat, but maybe you'd like to just comment on how you did it and pros and cons of that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I did it the wrong way. I thought this was very smart of me and very simple. I just started using a text program, in my case, Mac, so Pages. I just started writing and editing and all that. But then I had to put the photos in. And as soon as you start putting photos in, everything jumbles up. It's terrible. But I kept doing it and restarting, and finally I got it. I mean, as I showed, I have these. Let's see, for instance, let me look for a page with, like, there's a page where the photos are in and the text is next to it, and then you move the photo a little bit and it flips all the way. The text is somewhere else and the photos are somewhere else. So I would recommend using a real editing program, and usually that means that you have to order the book as well, so it's more expensive, right? And you have to buy a program and learn to work with it and all that. And these programs, as I found, are usually more to make photo books than to make text books. So that's a little bit problematic if you want to put in a lot of text. But in the end, it worked, and so I just went to a copy shop, in this case in Westdale, the print factory, or whatever it's called, and with this ring thing, and a thing like this costs you, if you make only one, it costs you about $40, But if you make 10, it's down to $20. So it's if you want to produce something that you can give out to your children or to whatever, then you can do that. But again, it was a lot of hassle to do it.
Thanks for that. Emily, I don't know if you want to say anything. You've published your memoir a different way than Jan did, but I don't know if you want to talk briefly about that. Or...
Well, really, I mean, I just want to say that it's great to listen to everybody's stories. Just lovely. The whole idea that Ellen had for the Memoir Project. It's for us all to be able to share our stories and learn from each other. So it's great to hear it, and it's great to hear the intergenerational aspect of it. And so, yay to everybody and for all the work that was done. I did write my memoir over many, many, many years, and then went through a whole publishing experience. So if anyone's interested, I'd be happy to talk with you on a one-on-one or whatever. But I did it through Friesen Press, which is a Canadian company, employee-owned, but it's a whole different process. So again, if anyone's interested, I'd be happy at some time to talk about that as well.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to connect with anyone, you can do that through Ellen or myself. As well, or in the chat, you can exchange your email addresses or phone numbers. Anyone else? I wanted to ask maybe Ursula and Irene if they want to comment on. You did in your memoirs a bit about, and I did, regarding with my mother coming to Canada and having to learn another language. So when you wrote your memoir, or what you wrote to present today, how did you think about that? Were you thinking in your native language, or were you thinking by this time in English? Is your adult self more present when remembering English, or do you hear the sounds of your parents' voices as you wrote? So, and anyone who's written or English is their second language, how was writing your memoir for you? What was going on in your head when you were writing? Anybody want to comment? Jan, you can if you want, or Jan, I should say.
I can say something about that, but maybe somebody else. I don't know. I wrote it in English because I was working with J.J. O'Neill, but soon after I realized that I had to make a Dutch version, so I translated the whole thing. And then I found that opened up my memory even more, really, a lot. Yeah. Things flowed out, and I started to write new stories and new ideas. I had to stop myself, actually, because it became too crazy. And actually, in the beginning, I sent a text to a good friend of mine in the Netherlands who is very proficient in English, and about a situation that he also experienced in our student life. And he said, I don't recognize anything of it. I don't understand it. It's totally different from and of course I understand that everybody has different memories of the same experience. But then later I had translated it, and I sent him the translation, and I said, oh yeah, now I understand. Yes, it makes total sense. So language is extremely important. I don't know. I'm here now for 20 years almost. I think I mainly think in English, but when I think about all the things or my past, I think in Dutch. So it sort of flips back and forth.
Yeah. There you go.
Can I just add a word here?
Sure.
I did my own biography during the COVID years. This was my COVID project, and I had all kinds of pictures and everything. I just used Word. With a bit of challenge, as Jan was saying. Indeed, the pictures were moving around, but I think I've got a good handle on that. And I had it printed at a Toronto press called Copywell. They did a great job. I'm really happy with the finished product. So if anybody wants to find out more about that particular printing press, I'll be happy to share that.
Oh, thank you. That's interesting as well. Anyone else want to talk about second languages or your experience, the seniors, with working with your student or
Okay. All right. I'll call you back in a few minutes. Okay.
anybody else want to?
I could comment.
Okay, Ellen.
The Hamilton Public Library has a program to help you print your book to make a hard copy or a soft copy. So that's another option. And Kirsch for is it Copywell, Copywell?
No, it's Copywell.
Yes. Okay.
In Etobicoke.
And it's okay. Oh, that's a possibility I hadn't heard of.
Sorry, in Woodbridge.
Oh, Woodbridge.
Yes, yes. Yeah, they did a great job, and all the pictures are in color.
Yes,
and
nice.
They sent me a sample copy. It was all done through email. Never had to go and visit until the end I went and picked up the copies. And the price was quite reasonable. It came to under $10 per copy for about 150 I printed. So I could share them with my family and friends and so on.
Yes, I understood you saying $100 a copy. That must be
No, sorry. No, about $10 a copy.
$10. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, that's wonderful.
Less than
Yes.
$10 actually.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact number, but I printed 150 copies.
Yes.
So of course, the more you print, the lower the price per copy.
Right. Yes. Well, thank you very much. That's
Okay.
good for our project to know about that option. Thank you.
Okay.
It's Margaret. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead,
Okay,
Margaret.
sorry I disappeared for a while. My computer ran out of power because I plugged in the dining room table, and I didn't warn me that So I'm back. I've just been sitting here enjoying everything wonderfully, and as Alan knows, I have been a participant in this project a few times. This time I chickened out. In itself is a story, but I won't tell the story right now. But it was a kind of taking out my resilience, I think, went away or something. I'm not quite sure, and I didn't take the opportunity. But I've learned a lot by listening to all of you, and I just really related to your swimming pool story because I grew up in Scotland, and as a child we went guide camping on the North Sea, which I could have waved for the Netherlands from there, and we stood there, skinny kids all, shivering because the swimming pool that we went to was actually filled from the water for the North Sea. And the temperatures, but it gave back beautiful memories,
Okay, yeah, sure.
And as 2 or 3 people have mentioned, I also emigrated in 1959 from Canada to Scotland.
Okay,
but what I've learned and what I've been thinking about a lot recently, I'm painfully slow. I have quite a few stories and ideas kind of half written, and I just need to get myself in action and be like Loretta does. I know, gets up very early in the morning, which I'm not an early bird at all, but I need to get some discipline that because I got lots of ideas. But listening to people, I'm learning a lot by listening, and actually not AI. I have nothing to do with AI, but I'm going to dictate rather than trying to type all the time. I'll dictate faster, and then I can just go over it and edit it. My husband was not he was a technical person, but he was actually, well, he acted a lot and he had a good imagination. So he used to write Christmas letters and things, and his spelling was terrible. It was a miracle when he got a secretary. That was the best thing that ever happened to him. Because he would say to the secretary, I can't spell, please. So he did. But I used to do the same with the family things that he did. Because he was an imaginative writer. He just couldn't spell. But I could go in and put it into English the way that well, in my English, he was Welsh. Anyway, thank you for sharing all of these things with me. You've reinvigorated me
Thank you, Margaret.
to go
Thank you.
on
Thank
and
you.
to thank you. And thank you.
Yes. And I'll hound you every once in a while, Margaret,
Yes.
to
Please.
make sure you do your writing. So
All right.
it is 5 o'clock, so I'm going to turn it back to Geraldine and to wrap us up for today and for this year's Memoir Fest. Thank
Can I
you,
just tell you
everyone.
one tiny story? The last one I wrote my relationship with the Queen, like, but through growing up in Britain, I had interactions, not the Queen personally, but just anyway, I wrote a story about that, and I wanted the finished with the launching of the Royal Yacht, which was very close. But anyway, I wanted a thing of John Brown's where my uncle worked in John Brown, so he gave us tickets for the launching. And this memory I've been, I was 13 at the time, and was going into the John Brown thing for I thought I was going to see a yacht because it's a big ocean liner. And the thing in my mind, the last episode of Downton Abbey, the last section of Life and Death, started right at the beginning. Great big John Brown thing. And it was that, but of course, I tried to get a picture, but it were all copyrighted. So this is still in my project things to do. But it was amazing when I sat down. This memoir wasn't quite finished because I didn't have what I wanted to finish it up with. And there it was, Downton Abbey, the whole thing. Anyway, it's just the thing, but it was quite. I sat there and thought, wow.
Well, you have to write about that one for
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
Thank you, Geraldine.
Well, Margaret, I'm putting you on the list for 2026 to 2027. Okay. All right.